In this episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, I am going to be sharing with you what I have been up to during the month of December after making my decision to unretire the Podcast Answer Man brand and also to bring back podcasting A to Z.
Are you ready to take your message, your business, and your life to the next level?
Want to learn from someone with more than a decade of experience, training tens of thousands of people from all around the world?
Hi, Cliff. This is Pauline from Auckland, New Zealand.
John from Calgary, Alberta.
Amy Porterfield.
Michael Hyatt.
Dan here from Dunedin, New Zealand.
Ray Edwards. Mark Mason. Mike Stelzner.
Pat from Smart Passive Income.
It's Darren from Melbourne, Australia.
Now is the time to live the life of your dreams and do the work you feel most called to do in the world.
Welcome to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show.
Here's your host, Cliff Ravenscraft.
Welcome back, my friend. I am super excited to share with you the behind-the-scenes look at what I have been up to since that bombshell of announcement that I am bringing back Podcast Answer Man. That Podcast Answer Man is going to be, moving forward, my primary focus as far as public messaging, meaning that it will once again, podcast consulting, technical, let me help you launch your podcast, let me help answer your questions related to podcasting. That will once again be the first entry point into the world of Cliff Ravenscraft for a large number of people moving forward. It's been almost a decade since I've had that privilege, that honor of having people who have never heard my name before come to me as a result of them simply having questions related to podcasting, and having a lot of people out there who know who I am and the 20 years of experience I have in this industry. They say, oh, well, you need to talk to Cliff Ravenscraft. And for a very long period of time, I pretty much shut that spigot off intentionally. Now, I talked about why I did that and why I've brought it all back in the episode before this. So if you go back to episode number 802 of this podcast, you'll hear why Podcast Answer Man's back and all of that stuff. But I want to share with you in this episode what I've been working on, the things that I've done. And I don't think there's going to be enough time for me to sit down and share with you everything I've done. But even what I have on this list is going to sound like a lot. And I promise you, there is a lot more. So here's what I have prioritized. The very first thing that I did once I made the official decision that I want to bring back Podcast Answer Man and also Podcasting A to Z, my 4-week online group training program where I teach you how to launch your podcast. As soon as I made that decision, I knew that I wanted to start speaking at events where I would speak on the topic of podcasting. Now, obviously, I'd want to speak at podcast-related events, so Podcast Movement. I knew that Podfest Expo is coming up in Orlando, and I know that I also want to speak at other, let's just say, tangentially related conferences and industries. So, for example, social media marketing world. I'm going to see if I can't get myself back on the stage out there in California. There's a Social Media Week Lima event for digital marketers and social media marketers. And I also want to go to these entrepreneurial online business related events and masterminds. And so I'm building a list of the events that I want to speak at. But one of the things that was coming up, and it was just a month away, was Podfest Expo. It's coming up in January. So the first thing that I did is I looked up Podfest Expo. I'm like, okay, I've never been to Podfest Expo. It got started right as I was making the decision to transition away from being known as the Podcast Answer Man and more into being known as the Mindset Answer Man. And as a result of that, I stopped going to podcast industry related conferences. I still went to Podcast Movement for a few more years here and there, and I'm glad that I did. But it just wasn't where my focus was at the time, and it didn't bring a good return on investment for prospecting of where my focus was. And so that's why I didn't attend Podfest Expo during the decade now that they've been doing this event. So I heard many wonderful things about Podfest, how it is more of an indie podcaster vibe overall. And I really like the indie podcaster vibe. I know that I'm on the fence of being an indie podcaster versus a professional podcaster who's doing this for business purposes and stuff like that. But I still have many shows that put me in the indie podcaster category, where I'm not doing the show for any financial reward or benefit whatsoever. I'm just doing it for the love of podcasting. I still today create content in that way for different shows from time to time. So with that being said, I knew I wanted to get an opportunity to speak on the stage if it was at all possible. So I went and did some research, found out who was involved in founding the event, and learned that one of the names associated to Podfest Expo was Nick Pavlidis. Now, Nick and I go way back to our days when we were both a part of Dan Miller's community, the 48 Days online Eagles group that he had back on the Ning platform. And I did some searching back in my emails and saw some notifications that alluded to some of the conversations that Nick and I had one-on-one. Turns out Nick has since purchased Podfest Expo. In fact, he purchased the event last year from the person who founded it. And when I learned that, I simply sent over a Facebook message and said, "Hey, Nick, let me ask you a question. Are you still into podcasting today?" And he said something like, "Well, I'm not actually currently producing a show, but I guess you could say I'm involved in podcasting as much as you could be involved. I just purchased Podfest Expo." I'm like, "Hey, that's amazing." And then I told him I was bringing back my Podcast Answer Man brand and wanted to know if he needed any speakers for the event. And he said that the spots had been filled over a month ago, but hey, let's jump on a call and have a conversation. Maybe we can make a spot for you. Well, long story made short, they made a spot for me, and I'm going to Podfest Expo, and I will be speaking and giving a talk on the various different reasons why you may want to consider creating a brand new podcast, an additional podcast that has no more than 5 to 10 podcast episodes. So I am super excited that I was able to work that out. That's going to put me in the room. And of course, even if I wasn't going to be speaking at Podfest Expo, I definitely would have been attending no matter what, because I definitely want to get back into building and continuing the relationships that I had formerly had with all of these people in this industry. And not to mention the fact that there's a lot of new people in the industry who are doing amazing things that I have not yet established a relationship with. And so now I'm not only going to go there to do that, but I will also be able to do that in the speaker lounge and in it. It's going to be nice. And I'm thrilled that it worked out according to plan and desire. And I love when a good thing comes together. So that's the first thing that I prioritized. The next thing that I did as a result of some online buzz and just making some noise out there in my social media platforms, letting people know that I'm bringing back Podcast Answer Man and Podcasting A to Z, and that this is a primary focus. I'm doing this to celebrate my 20 years in podcasting, but also because now's the right time, given all the reasons why I shared in episode 802, just one episode before this one. Anyway, Rob Greenlee reached out to me and he asked me to be a guest on his new media show, and we had a great conversation. Now, Rob and I go back almost 20 years. He used to be the guy who was 100% responsible for everything related to podcasting in Microsoft, back when Microsoft had the Microsoft Zune, and then eventually they had the the Microsoft phone and the microphone phone operating system and mobile operating system. And Rob was involved in making sure that podcasting was a part of the Microsoft platform when they still had that. And then since then, he's moved on to various other companies within the podcasting space. And today he's doing some of his own stuff. And he actually is, I think, the founder or one of the founders of the Podcast Hall of Fame. So it was great to be invited as a guest on his show. He used to do that show with his co-host and a man that has meant a lot to me personally, Todd Cochran. Unfortunately, Todd passed away this past year unexpectedly, and there's a vacuum in the podcasting space because he had a unique voice and one that was such an advocate for the indie podcaster out there. So anyway, it was an honor to reconnect with Rob Greenlee, to be a guest on his show, and I know that reaches, again, that audience that is a part of that circle. Me being a guest on his show certainly will not only reach the people who consume the new media show that Rob Greenlee does, but word will get out, word will echo. And so that was it's like, man, that's amazing that I had that opportunity. Now, the next thing that I've worked on is I've got Podcast Answer Man back to a high quality weekly production schedule. I published an episode on December 9th. That was episode 475 of Podcast Answer Man, and it was titled Podcast Answer Man is Back. And I answered all of the most frequently asked questions about the Zoom PodTrack P4 Next. And then just a few days later, actually 2 days later, on December 11th, I did episode 476, 20 years in, and we're still arguing about this, the real definition of a podcast. And that was just a short little episode. And then as I was processing this, I'm like, you know what? I think if I'm going to bring Podcast Answer Man back, and it's my primary focus, I'm going to commit to what I believe is a best practice, and that is frequency of a podcast once a week, every week, no more, no less. So therefore, no more podcast episodes 2 days apart from each other. And also, I'm committing to releasing my podcast not only on the same day of the week, but the same time of the week. And so there'll be an episode every Friday morning at 12:01 a.m. And so on December 18th at 12:01 a.m., I released episode number 477, Why I Moved the Podcast Answer Man website to Podpage. I'll talk about that a little bit later. On December 25th at 12:01 a.m., episode 478 dropped. Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and the Myth of 6 Simple Tips for Podcast Success. And then on Friday, January 1st at 12:01 a.m., episode 479, How Long a Podcast episode Should Be, Consistency, Habit, and the Truth About Video. So I am delighted to tell you that Podcast Answer Man, the podcast, is back. And it's good. The reception has been amazing. One person wrote to me, can I find this real quickly? Here it is. I put this in my journal. It meant so much to me. So I got an email from Jason Heilman, and it says here, subject line, a very positive, vulnerable, and open share about hearing episode 477. Now, of course, Podcast Answer Man episode number 477 was why I moved the Podcast Answer Man website to Podpage, but it wasn't that topic that brought about what you're about ready to read. It's just the fact that this was the first episode of the new brought back into his life episode of Podcast Answer Man that he listened to. And so here's what he said. Cliff, we go all the way back to Lost, 2005. Now, Lost is the TV show that I used to podcast with my wife about. We did 262 episodes, I think, over the course of 6 years. Anyway, he says, Cliff, we go all the way back to Lost, 2005. I realized today I've been listening on and off for 20 years. I just had to share this. When I listened to episode 477 today, and when that intro music hit, I literally got emotional. And this is the very vulnerable part of this email. I literally shed tears hearing that intro. And so what I wanted to share is this. I feel you're right back exactly where you're supposed to be with this move, and I'm inspired yet again. And then he said, I could share more, but I'll leave it at that. I made this short on purpose, but I hope this blesses you today. Love you, man. And then he signed Jay. That is not the only person who said that they got a feeling of emotion when they heard the Podcast Answer Man music when it kicked in at the open of a new episode. It has been phenomenal, and I'm thrilled to have just the opportunity to be in people's lives once again. And it reminds me that here we are. I'm on episode number 804 of this podcast, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And of course, the first 439 episodes of this show were Podcast Answer Man. Yet, even though I have continued to produce hundreds of episodes, a lot of people who loved Podcast Answer Man stopped listening, either altogether and haven't listened since, or, like Jason said, has listened off and on over the years. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine. And I don't have any regrets, but I will tell you that there's a number of people who say, Cliff, I'm glad that you're back, and I can't wait to put this on my rotation. In fact, I got an email from my friend Frank Lipsky. He sent this. He says, Cliff, I'm so happy to hear this. He was referring to a post I made about the return of Podcast Answer Man. He says, I've told you this before, but if it were not for podcasting A to Z, my life and business would be in a much different place today. I value our friendship a great deal and that of our spouses as well. Merry Christmas to you. And I can tell you right now, I only listen to 3 podcasts every single week without fail. And it just went to 4. Talk soon, Frank. Now, here's the interesting thing. Frank and I are pretty decent friends. He was a part of my podcast mastermind for over a year. He was with me as a one-on-one coaching client for a period of time. He's come to my paid workshops here for my Building an Online Business workshop. He and his wife came to a thriving marriage workshop that my wife and I hosted. His wife was a part of my wife's paid mastermind group for a year or just over a year. And they both attended the Free the Dream conference 2 years back to back. So there's a lot of relationship between myself and Frank Lipsky. Now, I want you to hear this. He currently only listens to 3 podcasts every single week. Now, he did not say that the Cliff Ravenscraft Show is not one of them, but I can tell you right now, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show is not one of them. And one of the reasons for that is because, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show hasn't been something that you could predictably rely on so that you can listen to as a habitual thing that you do every single week, because this podcast has been on this when I'm inspired to create a new episode, I will format or schedule, which, by the way, I'm just going to go ahead and drop it in here. I'm bringing back the Cliff Ravenscraft Show every single week moving forward as well. So yes, Podcast Answer Man will get a new episode every Friday morning at 12:01 a.m. However, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show also will get an episode every single week moving forward, and it will come out on Monday morning at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. Now, I'm not doing that so that Frank will maybe bump his list of podcasts that he listens to every single week up to 5. I know for a fact there's something about Podcast Answer Man that attracts Frank specifically and others like him. There's something about that podcast being so technical and related to just the whole art of communication and audience building and the tools and resources related to all of the things that surround that. And so I definitely feel that Podcast Answer Man has already demonstrated that there are already, just within the first month, there are about 200 people who have, since I made this announcement, subscribed to Podcast Answer Man, who used to listen to Podcast Answer Man and haven't listened to many of my shows since I stopped doing Podcast Answer Man consistently every week. Consistently every single week. And so I've brought those people back. And so even though the Cliff Ravenscraft show has continued consistently over the years, just not on a weekly basis, those people have not been as attracted to the content of the Cliff Ravenscraft show. Now, obviously, the Cliff Ravenscraft show has evolved multiple different times around its focus and things like that. I will share with you, since I'm now at this place. By the way, Frank, if you listen to this one, I'm thrilled that Podcast Answer Man is on your list every single week. And here's what I've been thinking. So in episode 802, I mentioned that Podcast Answer Man is now my primary focus moving forward. And if you want to hear me every single week, you'll want to subscribe to that podcast. Well, I certainly still encourage you to do that. But just like there are some people who will only want to hear me talk about things that are specific to the podcasting and content creation world or industry or related topics, there are some people who listen to this show who are not interested in those things. And I don't want to leave you behind. And so after I published 802, it began to sit with me the fact that I said, well, you know what? The Cliff Ravenscraft show has always been, for the longest time, it's been this when I feel inspired. But you know what? I not only want Podcast Answer Man to be back every single week, I want to have another show that is also every single week without fail. Just to show that if anything, that this can be done and it doesn't have to take forever and you don't have to hire an entire team of people. You can do all of those things. You can spend countless hours producing each single episode. You could hire teams of people to do everything so you never have to do anything other than just get behind the microphone. All of those things can be done, but I'm just wanting to show that, gosh, there are methods of creating content that makes it totally doable, that you could get behind a microphone every single week, once a week, with a new high quality podcast episode. And not only can you do it for one podcast, you could do it for two. And so I had made this decision that I'm bringing this back to a weekly schedule. So now there'll be an episode from me every Monday, every Friday, but one will be the Cliff Ravenscraft show, one will be Podcast Answer Man. And I had to ask myself, why two different podcasts? What would be different between them? Well, the reality is that I do not want to have a limit to only create content around podcast related topics. I still want to talk about business decisions. I still want to talk about sales and marketing. I still want to talk about personal development, business strategy. There's a lot of people who would listen to Podcast Answer Man who are not into podcasting or content creation for the business side of it. So the Cliff Ravenscraft show is still going to have that business strategy, and it's going to have that mindset, and it's also the behind the scenes stuff of the decisions that I'm making. So for example, if you think about it, I've been sitting here for over 20 minutes or so, and I've just been talking about my life and my business and my journey and where I've been focused. And that's this is not that what I'm doing here is not a good fit for Podcast Answer Man. In fact, it's one of the problems I had right as I was going through what I called the year of identity. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have more that I want to talk about. But every time I go in and talk about my personal journey and my personal decisions and my business stuff, a lot of people are like, Cliff, could you just get back to the technology of podcasting and the content creation and answering those questions like you've done for so many years? So I decided I want to keep both. I was already going to keep the Cliff Ravenscraft Show going, but my idea was maybe 1 or 2 episodes per month and maybe sometimes 3. But no, it's now also going to be once a week, every week, no more, no less. Every Monday at 12:01 a.m. there's a new episode of this podcast. And I will still work out, what makes a Podcast Answer Man podcast content for that. What content is the exact right fit over there, and what is the exact right fit over here? And I recognize already that there's some potential overlap, and I'll work that out as I go along. All right. Another thing that I've been working on, I moved my Podcast Answer Man podcast website over to a platform called Podpage. Now, I'm not going to explain to you why I did that. I'm just going to simply explain to you what I mean by that. So I still host my MP3 files, and I publish every new episode of my podcast to Kajabi. Kajabi is my podcast host. Just like Libsyn used to be my host, or for some of you, you might be with Buzzsprout for your podcast host, or you might be with Simplecast for your podcast host. This is where your MP3 files are uploaded. That's the company that hosts those files on the servers. That's the company that produces the RSS feed. That's where you go to give it your show the title and your show notes and all of that stuff. And many times, your hosting provider, such as Buzzsprout, Simplecast, Captivate, whoever, and in my case, Kajabi, they will oftentimes have some functionality where not only do they host your MP3 files and also host your RSS feed, but they have some web presence for people to listen to your episodes on that particular platform's website. So you have a page on there for your podcast. And many of these podcast hosting companies leave a lot to be desired, and Kajabi was one of them. And if you want to hear the full story about that, I encourage you to listen to episode number 477 of Podcast Answer Man. It's a full-blown episode, and I just wanted to share with you that that's one of the things that I have done in the month of December. It took a few days to get it completely all set up exactly the way that I wanted it. But if you head over to podcastanswerman.com, that domain is now a part of something called Podpage. Learn more about it, podcastanswerman.com/477. All right. I also set up an affiliate partnership with Podpage. I was so excited about their platform. And I'm happy to say that as a result of episode 477, there's already 4 people in my community who have already signed up for Podpage. And I know that it is just the beginning. And so new affiliate partnerships are things that have been on my list. And Podpage was the first new affiliate that I arranged. Actually, it's the second because I'm also an affiliate for Podfest Expo, I guess. So anyway, you get the idea. I'm working on new affiliate partnerships with companies that make sense, who have great products or services for podcasters, content creators, and online business owners and entrepreneurs. The next thing that I have on my list that I want to share with you is I completely updated my podcasting A2Z.com sales page for podcasting A to Z. If you want to check it out, you can go over to podcastinga2z.com. My next session of Podcasting A to Z is going to launch on January 26th. And that'll be right after I get back from Orlando, Florida, down there at Podfest. Which, by the way, if you want to go to Podfest, now that I mentioned that at the beginning, I forgot to tell you, I do have an affiliate with Podfest. And so let me go over here and get you the link. So if I go to my affiliates page, and do I have a affiliate code for Podfest? You know what? Somewhere I do have a code that will send you to a special link, but all you have to do is go over to podfestexpo.com, and if you apply the promo code PAM, which stands for Podcast Answer Man, so just go to podfestexpo.com, click on tickets, find the ticket that you want, and if you want 10% off, just head over to Podcast Answer Man and you can get that discount. So again, podfestexpo.com, click on tickets and use promo code PAM, Podcast Answer Man, PAM. All right, back over to where I was saying. So I have updated the sales page for Podcasting A to Z. The next thing that I've been working on, I've been doing a bit of live streaming content, which has been very strategic. First, I've created a new series of live streams that are interviews titled, Where Are They Now? So this is a series where I will interview former Podcasting A to Z students. These are students who are still creating content today, where they've produced anywhere between, let's just say, 300 all the way up to over 2,000 podcast episodes. And they're going strong, even though they graduated Podcasting A to Z more than 10 years ago. And I've already done 3 of these interviews. I have 3 more already scheduled. And one of the things that I will be doing is I'm going to put each of these conversations into my other podcast, which is called What Are You Creating? You can find that over at cliffravenscraft.com and click on podcasts in the nav menu. You'll see that I have a podcast. It's called What Are You Creating? And it's my interview only format podcast. It's the only podcast I have that is every episode is an interview, a conversation. Another thing that I hope to do with these interviews, I hope to take the transcripts of these conversations, send them through ChatGPT, and have it evaluate what clips, what sound bites can I pull from these conversations that can be incorporated into segments of my Podcast Answer Man podcast. And not to mention the fact that it does a lot to let people know just how successful the success rate has been for the students who have gone through Podcasting A to Z. Next, I had a live stream with Nick Pavlidis. I told you about that. We got onto a live stream to talk about his experience with the event, why he decided to purchase it, what the history of Podfest has been. It was a great conversation. Obviously, there's no doubt in my mind that Nick has since shared that with several other people. He mentioned that he was going to promote the return of Podcast Answer Man to his email list and some other things to promote, the things that I've got going on. And I will be putting that episode in, or that recording of that live stream conversation into an episode of What Are You Creating? And again, that also could be either a portion or even a good part of that conversation might be included in some future episode of Podcast Answer Man. Then I had another live stream. This one was with Jessica Suter. And Jessica is somebody that I've known for many years as a fellow speaker at Social Media Marketing World. I also have known that she's had a social media marketing event of her own just about 2.5 hours away from my hometown here in Northern Kentucky, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. It's in Lima, Ohio. And her conference is called Social Media Week Lima. And I attended it as a guest or as an attendee this past year because I wanted to see what she's got going on over there. And I was able to network with many of the other speakers who are also my peers that I've known for many years. Some people that I've just deepening a relationship where we've been acquaintances over the years. And it has been a great community experience. I wanted to give her an opportunity to tell her story, to expose her to my audience. So I have that live stream conversation I've already done. I will also put that out as an episode of the What Are You Creating podcast. And this also helped me deepen my relationship with Jessica. We've had several short conversations because we were in a room where she's hosting events or she's hosting a lot of other people, and I didn't want to monopolize her time. But this gave us an opportunity to have a deep dive conversation, the two of us, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm also hoping that maybe, just maybe one day, I might be invited to speak at her event. Especially now that I'm back on the topic of podcasting, and hers is a social media marketing conference. I was there last year, and there wasn't anybody that spoke on why you must have a podcast. So, or maybe I don't know. I don't think there was. Anyway, so I've been doing some strategic relationship building, live streams, reestablishing connections with folks who have succeeded with former experiences in podcasting A to Z. Lots of fun and exciting things are happening there. Also, in the month of December, I onboarded a few new clients. These are coaching clients, none of them related to podcasting. And the reason why I bring that up is because I do want to make a point that my focus moving forward isn't Podcast Answer Man to the exclusion of my business strategy and mindset coaching for anyone on the entrepreneurial journey. No, this is an addition. In fact, I'm bringing back Podcast Answer Man as my main content focus moving forward, my main public messaging moving forward, because I want it to be the first place where people who are on the entrepreneurial journey, who are thinking about things related to podcasting, where they have the chance to get to know me through Podcast Answer Man, so that maybe they'll sign up for Podcasting A to Z. And maybe after Podcasting A to Z, they become so excited about the experience that they had with me that they might want to either hire me for one-on-one coaching, or they might want to be a part of my next level mastermind, or they may attend some of my live event workshops. It is Podcast Answer Man and all of the podcast answering, technical Podcast Answer Man, Podcasting A to Z related products and services. All of that is meant to be that entry point into the world that is the greater parts of what I have to offer, so that those who are a great fit might also fall into my other business strategy and mindset and entrepreneurial focused products and services. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that if you weren't already. And then there's been one other really huge thing that I made a decision to do since December, and that is to move my email list back to ConvertKit. Now, here's one of those topics that could potentially fit into Podcast Answer Man, but could also fit over here. But for now, I'm going to record it and share it here in podcast or in the Cliff Ravenscraft show. I forget which show I'm recording right now. Anyway, I want to first share with you my history with email lists. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I didn't start my very first email list until October 2010. My very first experience sending an email to that list 2 months later, I made many, many thousands of dollars from my very first email. And then I immediately oh my gosh, I don't have very many regrets. In fact, I don't know that I have any real regrets. But boy, I definitely feel the sting of not having started my email list building when I first started this business full time in January 2008, or even earlier in December 2006 when I launched the very first Podcast Answer Man episode. Anyway, it is what it is. But I started with MailChimp. And then eventually MailChimp had some functionality limitations and some concerns about affiliate marketing that they were dealing with at the time. And so I moved over to a service called Aweber, and I was happy with them for many years until I heard about ConvertKit, and ConvertKit had some amazing automations and updated UI that made things super intuitive and easy to do, and it was beautiful, and it just was meant to be this modern email marketing system. And it also had some pretty big names behind it, and I felt very confident that this was going to be a company that's going to go somewhere. And so I moved away from Aweber and I moved over to ConvertKit. And I will tell you, I was incredibly happy with ConvertKit. There's only one problem I've ever personally had with ConvertKit, is that when I started with ConvertKit, they said, Cliff, we're going to create an affiliate program. And in this affiliate program, in our agreement with you, anybody you send to us, you will earn 30% commission for the lifetime of the account. And that's a pretty standard affiliate relationship. However, at some point, it was a couple years ago, they decided that they were going to change their affiliate agreement to where you get 30% commission for the first 2 years of any new sign up. Now, that may or may not have had I may or may not have just dealt with that. It's just that what really bothered me was they took all of these referrals that I've had for all of these years, and they said, if you've actually had been getting recurring revenue from customers that have been with us now that you referred over 2 years ago, you're no longer going to get those commissions anymore. And that was sizable. And that was not cool, I don't think. However, I've moved on. Obviously, I'm still, not completely over the fact that they changed it down the road. But hey, they have to do what they have to do. Eventually, it certainly leaned in my direction when I saw that Kajabi had come around to really solving some of the missing components of the email marketing system inside of Kajabi. I began seeing some people that I know and trust who are succeeding powerfully with their email list functionality. And I made the decision to move away from ConvertKit over to Kajabi. And it wasn't because of the affiliate situation. It was just, I'm like, why am I paying this extra fee every year over at ConvertKit when Kajabi could do it all? Well, guess what? I moved over to Kajabi, and I will tell you that I invested a significant amount of time in December, and I still have a little bit of time that I'm going to need to invest here in January to make the full transition from my email list being hosted in Kajabi over back to ConvertKit, which it's not called ConvertKit anymore. It's called Kit, K-I-T. By the way, I do have an affiliate relationship with Kit. If you want to go over to podcastanswerman.com/Kit, K-I-T, podcastanswerman.com/Kit. Anyway, why am I moving back over to Kit? Biggest reason, I prefer Kit's email sequence building over Kajabi's email sequence building. Now, an email sequence, and it used to be called an autoresponder. It's just a series of emails that you put into a list where when somebody gets put into that into that sequence, it automatically sends them those emails that are time delayed apart from each other. So that you can send people, you can move deeper into a relationship around a specific topic in an email sequence. You can start small and go deeper and then go to the next level and then go to a next level. It's also a great way where it's like, listen, if you sign up for my email podcasting newsletter, for example, I might say something like, hey, once a week for each of the next 10 weeks. I'm going to share with you my top 10 whatever resources or tips that have been the most impactful things that have helped thousands of podcasters over the last 20 years. So, by the way, I don't currently have that now. I used to have it. I will have something like that again very soon. But that's what a sequence is. Now, in Kajabi, they actually trigger their new email in each sequence differently from Kit. So, for example, when I build a sequence inside of Kajabi, I have to actually have every email in that sequence already written and scheduled before I put anyone into that sequence. Now, technically, that's not a limitation. I can go ahead and put people in there. But if I don't have enough emails in the sequence and have them scheduled by the number of days, that there's a potential that people could be in that sequence, but if they've been in the sequence too long, they might not get some additional emails that you put into the sequence later. So it's imperative, if you really want the benefits of email sequences or automations of this sort inside of Kajabi, you'll want to have every email that you would ever want in that sequence written ahead of time. Because with Kajabi, how they do it is each message is triggered by the number of days they have been since they've been added to that sequence. So send this one on day 1 of them being added. Send this second email on day 7. Send this third email on day 14. Send this next email on day 21. You get the idea. So it's from the day they were added to the sequence. That's when they're going to get each new email. Whereas with Kit, here's how it works. The very first email is set up and you tell it, hey, send this either immediately or X number of hours or X number of days since this person was added to the sequence. You can also go in and say, and you know what, no matter how long it's been, only send this email on these days of the week or on this one day of the week. It's so granular on Kit that it's beautiful. And then each additional email in the sequence is set up and triggered in such a way that says, send this email at least X number of hours or days since the last email, or it has, make sure that it's been at least 1 hour or 1 day or 7 hours or 7 days. But it basically says, do not send this next email to anyone on this list in this sequence until at least this amount of time. Now, the great news is that let's just say I put like 7 weeks worth of emails in my newsletter sequence. And if I put everyone into that sequence, well, those people are going to get 1 email a day every week, or I'm sorry, 1 email a week every week for 7 weeks. Now, let's just say I miss 4 weeks and I don't have an email to release. Well, I can go in and add an 8th email to that list. And even though those people may have been on the list for 10 weeks, it's immediately going to send them the 8th email in the sequence based upon as long as it's been at least 1 day since the last email and only on Monday, because that's when I would send my main newsletter. It's every Monday at 5 a.m., drop a new email. But also make sure it's been at least 1 day since the last email that they've received from this sequence. And also make sure all of that's true, but also only send emails on Monday. And I just love that granularity. If that didn't make complete sense to you, I don't know what else to say other than it's so vitally important, because I want to build and continue to be adding to this evergreen email sequence such that I'm no longer doing what I've been relying on for far too long now, which is broadcast emails. And the problem with sending broadcast emails as my email newsletter is that, gosh, everything that I've written for the last, 2.5, 3.5, 4 years that I've sent out as broadcasts, well, if you sign up for my email list today and you're added to my email newsletter, you'll never see those old messages. Whereas if I had this sequence still in Kit, and I will in January, I will bring all of those amazing emails back, and not only that, they will go to anybody who signs up to them. So let's just say I write 7 emails over the next 7 weeks, and you are on my list for all 7 weeks of that. But then it's now the 8th week. I'm getting ready to release that. You are getting today, or this Monday, you're going to get the 8th email. But if somebody else just signs up for my email list like this week, they're going to get the first email from that sequence on Monday. And the email that you got today, they'll get 8 weeks from now. I hope that all made sense. But it's one of the main reasons why I'm moving back to Kit. Not to mention the fact that Kit is 100% built for email marketing. It is a single purpose platform. They try to do some other things, but it's all tangentially related to email marketing. And so they do email marketing well. They do the email functionality well. Their automations and rules and stuff, it's done incredibly well. Kajabi's okay, and if it weren't for my desire to do what I just said with the email sequences, I would not be moving away from Kajabi. It's just that I don't want to have to write all of my email sequences and leave it be. And I even thought about the fact, I could go ahead and put 15 or 20 emails into a sequence and let that go, and then I could actually start another sequence and then set an automation that when they finish the podcast sequence or email sequence number 1, then put them into email sequence number 2. And it could be done, but when I don't have to, is it worth it for me to pay an extra annual fee of a sizable amount? Yes, because for me, I'm a business owner, and the return on investment of what I get from being able to communicate effectively the way that I want to communicate messages that are related to my offers, my products and services, hands down, yes, it's absolutely worth it. So let's see here. One of the things that I'm definitely also going to be doing is I'm going to be creating multiple email opt-in incentives. And I will have a custom sequence for every one of those email offers. And then once they are in that sequence, I'll have it set up such that, hey, once they've completed the sequence, which just simply means that once somebody in this sequence receives the final email in the list in that sequence, then immediately trigger this action, which is to add them to this newsletter. Now I'm going to have 2 separate newsletters. So each of my newsletters will have their own sequence as well. So I'm going to have lots of sequences, as you can tell. But my main newsletter is going to be more along the lines of business strategy, personal and professional development, mindset related stuff, encouragement, behind the scenes, those sorts of things. And then I'm going to have another email newsletter sequence that is my podcasting newsletter. And just like Podcast Answer Man, every single newsletter update from that sequence is going to be spot on content creator, podcaster, related technology, resources, stuff like that. So 2 separate sequences. And that way people, if they want to, they can choose not to receive the podcast related stuff or only the podcast related stuff. These are things that I've been thinking about. A lot of that stuff could be done inside of Kajabi as well. In fact, all of that could be done. But just that triggering of sequences. I do not like the idea of not being able to just drop in new additional emails into those lists of emails in each sequence. And that's why I'm moving back to Kit. All right, so because I need to move back to Kit, I had to change my email opt-ins and all of the automations for my my main website, because I have cliffravenscraft.com, and if you go over to mindsetanswerman.com/free, there are 2 different ways you can get access to my Free the Dream opening keynote address. And those are still Kajabi email opt-in forms, even today, after I've made all of these changes. And the reason why is because Kajabi, once they get the email opt-in and they do the double opt-in email confirmation, I want Kajabi to instantly go in and create a user account and password and send that to them via email, and then give them and grant them access to the product, which is the opening keynote address to the Free the Dream conference. Now, Kajabi has an integration with Kit. And so I turned that back on, which I used to have it on before, but I've turned it back on so that once somebody has double opted into my list with the Kajabi form, then it does all the automations, gives them the access to the product for Free the Dream opening keynote address. It sends them the username and password so they can log in. But then it passes that information on to Kit, and I've set it up so that Kit just automatically adds them to my list in Kit, but also automatically adds them to my Free the Dream sequence, which I've created over there. And that Free the Dream sequence used to be in Kajabi. I've moved it over to Kit. This is all super confusing. At this point, it could get even more confusing. All of that just to say I've had a lot of work on my hands behind the scenes, but it is all going to be worth it because of the things that I want to accomplish with my email marketing. And given the fact that I'm kind of for the last 8 years, my business has not been a digital marketing, content marketing business. I've still done a little bit of it. I've dabbled, right? However, a majority of what I've been doing over the last 8 years is all referral and invitation only kind of coaching. I've been focused on the prosperous coach method for creating clients, and I have not relied on all of these digital marketing tools and strategies. I've known about them. I've coached lots of people on them, but they haven't been something that has been a primary source of new clientele for me. But bringing back Podcast Answer Man, this is a content marketing, digital marketing related business that I am bringing back, and I want all of the tools to go with it. So that's something I've been working on. And then let's see here. I created a bunch of other automations there. Let me just say the last thing about this, and I'll stop talking about my email move over. I did it. I went into Kajabi and I said, listen, I want you to show me out of all of my subscribers, show me only the people who have opened an email within the last 90 days. I then exported that list as a CSV file, and I imported only those people into Kit. I sent a first email to that list. It was sent as a broadcast. My open rate was 59.4%, and 2.6% of those people clicked, or I'm sorry, 2.6% of the overall people that I sent it to clicked on a link within that email. The second email was sent via a sequence, and 54.1% opened that email, and it also had a 2.6% click rate. Now, I'm wondering, why is there a drop from 59% down to 54%? And it occurs to me that those people also got a very similar subject line just a few weeks earlier. So there were 2 emails, and I didn't think about it ahead of time. But when I sent a broadcast message via Kajabi a couple of weeks before saying, hey, Podcast Answer Man is back, and here's why. And then this sequence was, hey, here's the full behind the scenes stories of why Podcast Answer Man is back. It was very similar. But even still, 54% opened that email. That's awesome. Now, I'm just going to stop there. There's more that I could share with you about the geekiness of all of these things. I realize I'm already over an hour with this episode, so I'm just going to just leave it at that and just tell you that I've been working on some stuff over this past month. It has taken a lot of time, effort, and energy, but I have woke up every day excited to start my day. I am so fully alive. I'm so aligned with this decision to bring back Podcast Answer Man, and everyone can feel it. I know you can probably hear it in my own voice in this episode. I still have a bit to do. I'm going to need to get all of those people. I think I have I still have thousands of people who are on Kajabi who are not people who have, that it doesn't appear to Kajabi that they've opened emails within the last 90 days. I need to find a way, and I have an idea of what I'm going to do to start communicating to those people through the Kajabi email platform and let them know that, hey, if you want to still continue to hear from me, here's the process. Or just, I might even be able to find a way to just say, click this link, and it will instantly get you over to my new system. And then I will just keep sending those emails until they click that. And what the technical way I think I'm going to do it is I'm going to tell Kajabi that if they click this link, send them to this page, which will just be a page that confirms that, hey, thank you so much for clicking this. This will trigger an automated situation where it's going to take your stuff and it's going to put it over here. And on each Monday morning, you should start receiving my email newsletters once again. And then that's what they'll get on the landing page that they get to when they click the link. Then I will set up a triggered automation inside of Kajabi that says add a tag that's request move to Kit. And then I will go over to Zapier and set up a Zap inside of Zapier that looks at Kajabi and says anytime somebody gets the tag request move to Kit, then take that person's name, that person's email address, and all of this information and bring that person into Kit. And then it'll go into a specific form inside of Kit, and I'll go into Kit that once those people are brought in, Kit will automatically put anybody who comes in through that Zapier automation into Kit, put them into the email newsletter sequence, like I said, and also I'll make sure that in Kit it will say automated request convert Kajabi to ConvertKit or something. I'll find some way of documenting it. But anyway, those are things that I'll still need to work on. Here are some other things that I've got on my list for the days and weeks ahead. Number one, I need to outline and build slides for my Podfest Expo talk. Again, head over to podcastexpo.com and use promo code PAM if you want to come see me in Orlando, Florida. Let's see here. I need to create an outline to introduce my friend Pat Flynn. I will be inducting him into the Hall of Fame, the Podcast Hall of Fame. That's going to be super exciting. Also, by the way, if you haven't heard, Dan Miller, mentor of mine for, nearly 15 years, he is being inducted posthumously into the Podcast Hall of Fame. His wife, Joanne, is going to be there. His daughter, Ashley, is going to be there. His sons, Kevin and Jared, are going to be there. And Dave Ramsey is going to be doing the induction for Dan Miller's Hall of Fame induction. So, we all miss Dan Miller, but I'm so thrilled that the folks who are a part of the Hall of Fame have decided to honor him and his legacy in podcasting that way. So that's going to be amazing. And I do need to, I'm going to come up with some sort of outline about the things that I'll say about Pat when I do his induction. Then next, update on a ton of tutorials for podcasting A to Z. That's launching January 26th. So there'll be a lot of things that I need to update there. And of course, not to mention the fact that I'll be producing an episode of Podcast Answer Man, and that'll be scheduled to release at 12:01 a.m. every Friday. I'll be recording an episode of this show scheduled to release 12:01 a.m. every Monday moving forward. I'll be writing an email newsletter that will go out every Monday at 5 a.m. I will consistently be posting on social media. I will be serving my current clients. I will still be using the Prosperous Coach method for creating one-on-one coaching clients and people for my next level mastermind. And also, I will be marketing my podcasting related products and services, such as Podcasting A to Z and my affiliate products like podcastanswerman.com/kit, podcastanswerman.com/kajabi, podcastanswerman.com/podpage, and I could go on and on and on. Oh my goodness. That's what I wanted to share with you. If you are excited that the Cliff Ravenscraft Show is also coming back on a weekly basis and that you're looking forward to joining me every Monday to kick your week off with a new episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, I'd love to hear from you. And also, if you're going to also subscribe to Podcast Answer Man and let me join you for the weekend, every weekend, I would love to hear that as well. Email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. And if you want to launch your podcast and have me as your coach for 4 weeks, make sure you head over to podcastinga2z.com. Now is a great time to put your voice into the world. Let me help you take your message, your business, and your life to the next level by helping you launch your podcast. And by the way, Podcasting A to Z is not just for people who haven't yet launched a podcast. I've had many students over the years who already had a podcast, who signed up simply because they have unlimited access to me as their coach for 4 whole weeks. You ask me an unlimited number of questions. My guarantee is that I will respond and answer every single question, 4 weekly group coaching calls, and access to all of my tutorials and many tutorials that will be created just because you asked a very specific question. Join me. January 26th is the launch of the next session of Podcasting A to Z. Register today at podcastinga2z.com.
Podcast Answer Man.